commits it, no matter what ideology fuels it. I condemn all violence and threats of violence in the strongest possible terms, whether the targets are pregnancy counseling centers or abortion clinics, period. Violence is never an appropriate form of protest. This committee has passed legislation that will protect our judges, and I'm glad we did it. I'm sorry to say that one of the most important bills, the Daniel Anderl Judicial Security and Privacy Act, which would give the Supreme Court police greater discretion in protecting the justices and their families, among other provisions to protect judges, has been held up on the floor, and I can say the person holding it up is a junior senator, Republican senator from Kentucky. I think it's a serious mistake. Lives are at risk as we fail to put this into law and to give even more resources to the judiciary to protect their members. Today we welcome 5 witnesses, and I thank them for joining us. Before we swear them in, I'll briefly introduce the Democratic witnesses, then turn to Senator Grassley to introduce the Republican witnesses. Our first witness is Illinois' Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. She's the 48th Lieutenant Governor in the history of our state. She previously served as a member of the Illinois House of Representatives, and I'm grateful for your traveling here, Lieutenant Governor. Professor Kiara Bridges, Professor of Law at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. I also want to thank Professor Bridges' mother, Deborah, who's here celebrating her birthday. So I understand she's in the audience, and we welcome her. Dr. Colleen McNicholas is an OBGYN and the Chief Medical Officer of Planned Parenthood of the St. Louis region in Southwest Missouri. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. McNicholas. Now let me turn to Senator Grassley before I administer the oath for his introductions.
My first person is Denise Harley. Ms. Harley serves as Senior Counsel, Alliance Defending Freedom, where she's Director of the Center for Life. In this role, Ms. Harley leads her team's litigation and advocacy effort to defend pro-life legislation around the country. She also networks with pro-life allies, speaks publicly on behalf of her organization, and works to defend the First Amendment freedoms of pro-life healthcare professionals and pregnancy resource centers. Since joining ADF, Ms. Harley took the primary role in drafting the briefs to the US Supreme Court in NIFLA versus Becerra, resulting in a free speech victory for California pro-life pregnancy centers. We welcome you. Next, we have Heidi Matsky. Ms. Matsky is Executive Director of the Alternative Pregnancy Center and has worked with them for 7 years. The center is a nonprofit pro-life women's medical clinic which seeks to address the holistic aspect of an unplanned pregnancy, including the medical, emotional, material, and spiritual needs of the mother. These services are free through the clinic. The center provides pregnancy tests, ultrasound, abortion pill reversals, STD testing and treatment, prenatal care, gynecological care, abortion recovery classes, and contraceptive education. Prior to working at the center, Ms. Matsky worked as Director of Health Services for the Christian Financial Strategies. We welcome you as well.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Let me explain the traditional procedure before the committee. Each of the witnesses will be given 5 minutes for an opening statement, then members will be recognized in order for 5 minutes of questioning. Before we proceed, though, I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise their right hand for the administration of an oath. Affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record reflect that all 5 witnesses have answered in the affirmative. And now for their opening statements, I first recognize Lieutenant Governor Stratton. Please proceed.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and the distinguished members of the Senate Judiciary Committee for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Juliana Stratton, Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Illinois, and I use she, her pronouns. Since coming into office, Governor J.B. Pritzker and I have been focused on the health, safety, and access to opportunities for all women of Illinois, of all backgrounds and ages. And one way that we've worked to make that a reality is by preserving and protecting legal abortion in Illinois. In 2019, Governor Pritzker signed the Reproductive Health Act, which enshrined reproductive rights into state law, repealed outdated laws criminalizing abortion, and requires private health insurance plans to cover abortion as the vital reproductive health procedure that it is. We made a vow that our state will be a beacon of hope for all. This was a promise that we made to the people of Illinois, and I come before you today because people throughout the entire Midwest are relying on our commitment to protect and preserve women's rights, namely the right to an abortion. It is no secret that Illinois stands out as one of the only states in the U.S. heartland where our laws on legal abortion have not been impacted by the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. We are not just an oasis of reproductive care, but an island. And here's what that looks like. It looks like disenfranchised, yet determined patients coming from every surrounding state, but also from as far away as Tennessee, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida. It looks like the entire staff of our state's abortion clinics fielding phone calls for appointments because the number of out-of-state patients has doubled since Roe v. Wade was overturned. And that's on top of the nearly 10,000 women who already came to Illinois seeking abortion care, according to 2020 data by the Illinois Department of Public Health. In the coming months and years, these numbers will inevitably increase, and sadly, too, will the preventable suffering and pain of women and families across the nation facing the negative ramifications of a post-Roe America. Because of the history of systemic racism, we know that inequities are amplified within the Black and Latinx communities. A post-Roe America will be devastating for Black women, whose maternal mortality rate is already 2 to 3 times higher than that of white women because of structural racism and misogyny. One study projects that without safe and legal access to abortions, that number will increase by over 30% among Black women and nearly 20% for Hispanic women. Let's take a moment to just let that sink in. We are facing a future rife with needless death, despite 61% of Americans believing abortion should be legal in most or all cases, according to a Pew Research Center survey conducted in March 2022. It's hard to overestimate just how devastating the outcome of this ruling is and will be, despite our years of preparation. Before the threats to Roe v. Wade were fully realized, Illinois was proactive, upholding bodily autonomy and protecting the right to an abortion. And still, the overturning of Roe v. Wade has sent us down a dark, agonizing path. The Supreme Court's decision does not, quote, leave abortion up to the states, when every state will be impacted. To be clear, this means every city, town, county, urban, suburban, and rural. And our rural and unincorporated areas already experience inequities when it comes to accessing healthcare overall. The weight of this ruling will surely be felt across state borders. In Illinois and in states like ours, we are bracing for what is to come as these diverse communities across the nation turn to us. Governor Pritzker called on the president to move forward on key items that will address how states like ours will be affected, like creating a centralized hub for providers and patients to ease the burden on facility capacity amid higher demand. And most of all, Illinois and other states with legal abortion need more access to federal money to support demand. I commend President Biden for the steps he has taken to safeguard access to reproductive care through executive order on Friday, which included actions to expand access to contraceptives. This is a great start. In Illinois, all hands are on deck as we brace for what is coming, because we know we are the only lifeline for so many after so much has been taken away from women. from the American people. I say this not just as the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, but as a mother of 4 daughters, my daughters who now have fewer rights than I had. In Illinois, and based on Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, it is likely this may not be the last rights that will be stripped from future generations, as access to contraceptives and the right to love and marry who you choose have already come under threat with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. In Illinois, we will not go back. We will not be silent or stand on the sidelines. And I thank Governor Pritzker, Illinois' legislative leaders, and our state's General Assembly, and all the community advocates who have joined forces to ensure just that. We already know how dangerous it is to turn back the clock of progress, and I ask each of you, as leaders, help us push forward before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement, Lieutenant Governor. We extended the period for your statement a little bit, and the same courtesy will be extended to all the witnesses. Ms. Harrell.
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the committee, I'm Denise Harley, Senior Counsel and Director of the Center for Life at Alliance Defending Freedom. The Dobbs decision provides tremendous hope for women and unborn children across this country. For the first time in half a century, the people, through our elected representatives, have the legal authority to affirm the dignity of women and fully protect unborn babies. The Supreme Court was correct to overrule its egregious decision in Roe v. Wade, where 7 male justices insulted women's dignity by saying that motherhood forces upon us a distressful life and future. I'm here today with my own mom and my precious 4-month-old baby girl, and I have 2 children at home. I join with millions of mothers nationwide in saying that the ruling in Roe was a shameful, dehumanizing, and false characterization of the role that women and moms hold in our society. I know that every woman's story is unique, and for that some women, finding out you're pregnant is very difficult and unwelcome news. But pregnancy is not a barrier to success, and motherhood doesn't ruin a woman's chance to have a happy, fulfilled life. To say otherwise is demeaning and degrading. Dobbs was also a victory for the Constitution. As the decision explains, nothing in our Constitution's text, history, or structure supports a so-called right to abortion. Even constitutional law scholars who are pro-abortion have admitted this. Harvard law professor Lawrence Tribe said Roe was a verbal smokescreen and that the substantive judgment on which it rests is nowhere to be found. The late pro-abortion icon Justice Ginsburg called Roe a heavy-handed judicial intervention that was difficult to justify. And legally, scientifically, morally, it is. Under the Roe regime, the United States became an extreme outlier in abortion law. 75% of nations around the world don't permit elective abortion at all, or at most limit it to 12 weeks. But under Roe, the United States joined a handful of countries, including human rights abusers, China and North Korea, to allow abortion on demand after 20 weeks of pregnancy. The Dobbs decision unshackled states from this judicial power grab in Roe that was based on falsehoods about history and science. Now we can apply scientific knowledge that we've gained since that infamous decision. Medical advancements in the past 50 years have made it crystal clear that states have a compelling interest in protecting unborn children at every stage of development. With the help of ultrasounds, we've learned that babies in the first 12 weeks develop heartbeats and brainwaves. They move around and kick. They can hiccup, suck their thumbs, even taste what their mom eats. It's entirely reasonable and right for Americans to protect these tiny humans, and the American citizens are prepared to do so. In fact, reports that Americans supported Roe are extremely misleading. Roe allowed for abortion up to the moment of birth, but nearly 90% of Americans oppose abortion in the 3rd trimester, let alone until birth. Now, for women who find themselves overwhelmed by the prospect of motherhood, there is hope, and it doesn't involve destroying the baby for a fee. We need to be pointing pregnant moms towards real help. Thousands of pregnancy resource centers around the nation stand ready to support women at no cost with tangible services both during and after a mother's pregnancy. Many states are also pouring resources into creative programs to ensure that every pregnant mom can access the critical support she needs. Churches, adoption agencies, and other civic organizations are redoubling their efforts. Dobbs marks a new day for our country, the opportunity to build a better society than the one the court forced upon us in 1973. A society that not only affirms that life is a human right, but that embraces motherhood by providing opportunities for women to thrive as moms. We as a nation can no longer use Roe as an excuse to treat pregnancy as a woman's problem that she alone must solve. It's time to implement innovative support systems and empower women to pursue full and flourishing lives for their families and themselves. The post-Roe legal landscape is changing as we speak, but I am so grateful that we're entering a new era where the American people have the opportunity to lead the world in upholding the dignity of women, of their children, and of human life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Professor Bridges?
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the Senate Committee on the Judiciary, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Kiara Bridges, and I am a professor of law at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. I'm here today to explain how the US Supreme Court's radical decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization to take away constitutional protection for reproductive freedom harms people of color. In Dobbs, the court upheld Mississippi's ban on abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, and in the process, overturned Roe versus Wade. Dobbs declares that Roe erred when it interpreted the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause to protect a right to terminate a pre-viability pregnancy, insofar as that clause only protects rights that are, quote, deeply rooted in the nation's history and tradition and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty, end quote. For the Dobbs majority, the country's laws in 1868, the year that the 14th Amendment was ratified, determine whether abortion rights can be so characterized. After canvassing abortion regulations in 1868, the majority concludes that abortion rights are not part of the nation's history and tradition. The painfully obvious point to make is that people with the capacity for pregnancy were not part of the body politic during the period of the nation's history that the majority believes is decisive of the constitutional inquiry. Women could not vote in the country for another half a century after 1868. Because women could not participate in the democratic process, one could reasonably assume that their interests were not reflected in any of the nation's laws, including the criminal laws that the Dobbs majority reads as foreclosing a constitutional right to terminate a pregnancy. Thus, the majority's decision to privilege the year 1868 and to attempt to divine the meaning of the Constitution by looking at the nation's practices during that time is a decision to privilege an era characterized by the formal exclusion of people with the capacity for pregnancy. People of color, specifically Black people, will feel the impact of the court's decision in Dobbs more than any other racial group. Black people's abortion rate is 3 to 4 times white people's abortion rate. This is a direct result of Black people's higher rate of unintended pregnancy, which in turn is due to higher rates of poverty among Black people. A frequently cited reason that individuals give for terminating an unintended pregnancy is that they cannot afford to have a child at that time. Thus, the unequal burden of poverty that Black people bear renders them more likely to face an unintended pregnancy in the first instance, and in the second instance, to lack the funds thought necessary to carry the pregnancy to term and raise the child. As such, when states are permitted to use the criminal or civil law to make abortion inaccessible, states render unavailable a service upon which Black people desperately rely. Further, the number of people of jails and prisons has grown tremendously since 1973. The incarcerated population has quadrupled in the last 40 years, with close to 2 million people confined in jails and prisons today. This is to say that the country currently is much more willing than it was in the generations that preceded Roe to turn to jails and prisons to address its social problems, both real or imagined. Moreover, there now exists precedent for punishing people for poor pregnancy outcomes, a precedent that simply did not exist during the era of criminal abortion laws that preceded Roe. In the 1980s, during the crack cocaine scare, states began to use creative interpretations of the criminal law to prosecute Black people who used the drug during their pregnancies. arrests and prosecutions for substance use during pregnancy continue to the present. Further, criminal punishment of pregnant people who have suffered poor birth outcomes occur outside of the context of substance use. For example, prosecutors brought charges against a depressed pregnant woman who attempted suicide and suffered a miscarriage as a result. I could go on and on. Although a number of abortion rights opponents currently claim to consider the pregnant person who has an abortion to be a victim, I am skeptical about the sincerity or endurance of this belief in light of our current practice of punishing pregnant people for their pregnancy outcomes. Importantly, even if Black people attempted to self-manage abortion despite the threat of criminal punishment as frequently as people of other races, we should fully expect that Black people will be more frequently and more harshly punished for breaking the law. We should have this expectation because, as a general matter, Black people are more likely than their non-Black counterparts to be arrested, prosecuted, indicted, and convicted for the same conduct, and they serve longer sentences than their non-Black counterparts, even when controlling for relevant factors. In conclusion, I cannot overstate the level of harm and chaos that the Dobbs decision has already caused people seeking abortion care, providers, and practical support organizations. The crisis in access to abortion care in the United States highlights the need for a bold, holistic, and intersectional policy response that puts within its range of vision everything from the need for comprehensive paid family and medical leave to laws that urgently protect the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Ms. Matsky, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yes.
Please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the committee, thank you so much for the privilege and honor of being here today. My name is Heidi Matsky, and I'm the Executive Director of Alternatives Pregnancy Center in Sacramento, California. I came into this role by a roundabout road that began in a very emotional place. A number of years ago, on the day my sister and I were supposed to leave for college, she showed up at the door and collapsed on the ground. I said, "What's wrong?" as I looked into her eyes. She looked up at me and she said, "I'm pregnant." I still remember the fear in her eyes. I see that fear almost every single day in the eyes of women who come into our center. They need help, they need someone to talk to, and they need hope. I know because my sister needed all of those things. Our family needed all of those things, and we found them in a local pregnancy care center. And years later, because I wanted to give that same help and hope and support to others, I became the director at Alternatives. As an organization of mostly women serving women, the staff of our clinic offers our patients compassionate, holistic care, ministering in whatever gentle ways we can to their physical, emotional, and even spiritual needs. So it grieves me that since the Supreme Court announced its Dobbs decision, a great deal of misinformation has been spread about who we are and what we do. So let me share with you some of the facts. Our clinic is one of nearly 3,000 pregnancy care centers serving women across America. Each year, hundreds of thousands come to our clinics looking for free medical care, emotional support, and practical resources that will enable them to carry their pregnancies to term. Our clinic alone in Sacramento provides over $1 million of free medical services each year to women who come to us. We charge them nothing. That means we never financially benefit from any choice a woman makes. We make no profit of any kind off the women who turn to us for help. We offer pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, prenatal care up to 24 weeks, well woman visits. We test and treat for sexually transmitted diseases. We offer abortion pill reversal services, abortion recovery counseling, and parenting classes. And if finances are a problem, we have diapers, wipes, baby formula, baby food, baby clothing, baby supplies. And if a woman needs a hotel room, we provide that as well. We pay for all of that. It doesn't matter who she is, where she comes from, or what her past is. At our center, all medical services are provided by a staff of licensed medical professionals, including doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, and medical assistants. They are deeply compassionate people because most of them have experienced abortion for themselves. Our OBGYN doctor was an abortionist. When a woman comes in so afraid of what an unplanned pregnancy will mean for her life, her ambitions, her relationships, we do not urge her in that moment to make any decision. We listen, we try to hear her heart, we offer professional services and emotional support. Whether she chooses parenting, adoption, or abortion, we will continue to be there for her for years if necessary. Many women choose abortion because they lack the resources and support they need to confidently choose to parent. Over the last 5 years, American Pregnancy Care Centers have served nearly 2 million women who were faced with an unplanned pregnancy and wanted an alternative to abortion. Yet, pregnancy care centers from coast to coast are being targeted for violent assaults of vandalism and hateful attacks online and in the media. Just last week, as the exhibit shows, a man approached our care center with an armed machete. We have been forced to hire 24-hour on-site security. We've had to reinforce doors and bulletproof our walls. We've had to paint our building with anti-graffiti coating. We've added cameras, armed our staff with pepper spray, and stopped running our mobile clinic because of threats of violence. We have been forced to expend valuable resources for women of up to $150,000 just to protect ourselves. Why? Because we offer free care to women. What we do, though, is worth the risk. Every community needs a place for women facing unplanned pregnancies who are seeking dependable medical resources in a safe, caring environment during one of the most difficult times of their lives. You are pregnant. 3 of the most powerful words a woman will hear in her life. For some, the words bring incredible joy, and for others, incredible fear. Both deserve support. I thank you for the privilege of sharing with you a brief glimpse of hope, service, and compassion our pregnancy centers and so many others across this great country provide to women every single day.
Thank you, Ms. Matsky. Dr. McNicholas.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. My name is Dr. Colleen McNicholas, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a board-certified OBGYN, trained to provide the full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health care, including abortion care. I practice in Missouri and Illinois, 2 states where people are living such vastly different realities that it should be considered by each one of you to be un-American. On June 24th, when the Supreme Court overruled Roe v. Wade, it effectively created 2 nations. One, where those whose reproductive freedom belongs to themselves, and another whose reproductive freedom belongs to a small group of politicians who have effectively appointed themselves as decision makers over our bodies, our lives, and our futures. Today, I'm here to speak for patients, the patients I serve every day. People from across the Midwest and South who navigate a ridiculous obstacle course just to access basic care. While it may take us years to understand how the Supreme Court decision in the Dobbs v. Jackson case will have impacted our public health outcomes, we already know, just 18 days into this post-Roe reality, how it's disastrously complicating people's lives and putting doctors in impossible situations. Since ceasing abortion care at our health center in St. Louis, which was the last remaining abortion clinic in Missouri, our health center in Illinois, just across the Mississippi River, has cared for patients who have traveled as far as 1,000 miles each way. Each one of those patients has told me they had no choice but to travel hours and hours for care. Almost overnight, our Illinois clinic has seen appointments triple, and that's already on top of a double book schedule we were sustaining in the wake of Texas and Oklahoma's abortion bans. As we've long said, overturning Roe will not stop the need for abortion. The Supreme Court's decision has already pushed people, the people each one of you represents, into extreme and sometimes dangerous circumstances in order to access one of the safest and most common healthcare procedures. In Missouri and several other states, abortion is banned except in a medical emergency. In other words, in order for doctors to avoid prison time, instead of treating a patient before their health condition becomes life-threatening, doctors must now contemplate how sick is sick enough before providing life-saving abortion care. People will suffer unnecessary harm as doctors wait for permission from hospital lawyers to tell them that they can proceed. In some circumstances, the abortion care will come too late. Not only is this agenda unpopular, it is deeply anti-life. We already know that abortion care is inextricably linked to maternal health outcomes. And in Missouri, Black maternal mortality is 4 times higher than that for white women. Forcing people to continue pregnancies they do not want or cannot bear will cost lives. Forcing people into parenting without passing policies that address childcare costs, paid family leave, or a formula shortage will cost lives. The anti-abortion agenda is anti-life and hypocrisy at its worst. I have a plea for our allies too. Those of you who have long stood with us and committed to protecting reproductive freedom. Listen to those of us who have been warning about this moment for years. Work with critical access states to ensure that abortion remains accessible. Use every bit of your power to do something. On June 24th, 1 hour before the Supreme Court dismantled abortion rights, I was sitting next to HHS Secretary Javier Becerra, along with partners and allies in Missouri, including the Congresswoman from the 1st District, Representative Cori Bush. In that meeting, we asked the Biden administration to declare a public health emergency to support the patients who will have to flee their home states for abortion care. As 36 million people of reproductive age now or soon will live in a state where abortion is banned. Senators, I come before you tired, frustrated, and angry. Those of us on the front lines, the abortion activists that President Biden's team just this weekend referred to as out of step, we are the ones who are holding back this public health crisis that's about to sweep the country. I speak on behalf of my colleagues, abortion providers and advocates. We deserve better. We need action, and we need it now. We're out of time. Thank you for inviting me to share about this moment in history, which I am certain will be a stain as we move forward. Abortion is normal, it is an act of love, and it is fundamentally healthcare.
Thank you, Dr. McNicholas. We'll now go into 5-minute rounds for the members to ask questions.